by um, Mishna Berura.
Hey, let me invite Yossi Rosenthal real quick.
Yeah, we were by Mishna
Oh,
Berura
three
2,
three
right?
fourteen. Yeah, 314
314.
Aleph Mishnah Berurah base.
Okay. So he said she'ena machzekes, that it doesn't hold, right? Because in other words, the Mechaber was talking about that. So therefore, if you have such a type of keli, right? He was talking about the one that has broken pieces or whatever. That this is what you're allowed to do and this is what you're not allowed to do. So I believe it was the Ramah that commented that so long as it doesn't, meaning that it doesn't hold 40 saw. Why? The ilo he machzakis mem saw have like oil. Because if it is the size of 40 saw, like we said before, that's 1 cubit by 1 cubit by 3 cubits. Then it's like a tent, meaning that the general rule is that something that's attached to the ground is something that you can build onto, regardless of the size, if it's the ground or attached to the ground. However, if something is larger than this size, it is a tent, and it is also takes on the characteristics of something that is attached to the ground, and therefore it would be complete building and disassembling, or what's the word of steer is demolition.
Demolition.
Yeah. Even with any amount, not like by kalim, where we're saying by kalim, right, by vessels that are by movable objects, that we're saying that it's only under certain, only if it's like a complete sort of building or destruction. But if it was bigger than this size, then it would be anyways even a smaller amount, even any sort of amount would still be building. Arbaim saw, what's 40 saw? What's this amount? Hainu amo al
Hold on. Some notes. Oh, I guess after this one. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, fine. Okay. One amma by another amma by 3 ammas. Im oivi had the funnies. This is we actually brought this in the last Siman as well when we were talking about these things. With it includes the width of the walls. Right? Why? Because the walls are part and parcel to its ability to hold stuff. I think it's like the crowns and the moldings and stuff. There, it's like a crown flavored
the thickness of the lip.
Yeah. So it says it's like a molding basically that's surrounding its lip or whatever, or a crown. So it doesn't have to be a molding, because I guess a molding is usually a separate piece. This could be even if it's part of it. And the feet, and this comes from the Rambam, and I believe the reasoning is because the walls itself is part of the vessel, whereas the pieces that are sticking out, it could function without them. It's extra to it. Then you said there was notes.
Yeah. Says actually, that was the Magen Avraham. I'm quoting the Rambam. So keeping in mind the Magen Avraham, for those that are playing the home game, keeping track of what the Magen Avraham says. Yeah, that came from him. So first of all, yes, we said if the jug holds 40 saw, then it is like an oihel. Well, no, they just translate it, a tent, whatever, a makeshift structure. Okay, but then we said so. Baina b'seiser are applicable to it, even slight baina b'seiser, even a slight construction or destruction, like with the refurbished jug. So that Amma thus adopts the stringencies of both views that were brought that the introduction talked about. The malacha of seiser applies even to inferior kalim that are 40 saw or larger, and to intact kalim even if they're smaller than that. And see the Bir Halacha for the dissenting view of the Rajba and for the practical law in this regard. So 40 saw, it includes the thickness of the walls. So then even if the jug cannot actually hold 40 saw in it, it's still considered a large kli as long as the total area is 1 by 1 by 3 ames, including the thickness of its walls. So now we said the thickness of the lip and the legs. So the citation the Magen Avraham brings from the Rambam in Hilchos Kelim with regards to the law of Tuma, that's where this is coming from. The background to Rambam's ruling is as follows. The Torah in Parshas in Vayikra 11:32 states that a wooden kli and a sack are susceptible to Tuma. The juxtaposition of these two items teaches us that in order for a wooden kli to be susceptible to Tuma, it must resemble a sack. Just as a sack is meant to be carried along with its contents, so too is a wooden kli susceptible to Tuma only if it is meant to be moved while it is full. And you can see that from Gemara Shabbos 83a. The Mishna in Kelim 15:1 teaches that if a wooden kli has a capacity of at least 40 sa, and it also has a flat bottom so that it can rest on the floor, it is presumably not meant to be moved around when it is full, since it's liable to break. Or it might just be too heavy, but for some reason it's stressing the fact that it might break. So I guess it doesn't, it won't retain its structure, so then I guess the structure wouldn't count towards the 40 sa, and is therefore not susceptible to Tumah. The Mishnah later, in 18:1, cites Beis Hillel, who maintains that the walls of the kli count toward the size of 40 sa, but its lips and legs do not. This is because the walls are integral to the function of the kli, whereas the lip and legs are not, and are therefore viewed as foreign appendages to the kli. The Magen Avraham here, who cites this Rambam, holds that the same parameters apply with regard to determining the size of the jug vis-a-vis the melacha of seiser. This is indeed logical. Those parts of the kli that are integral to its function count toward its size. Thus, the legs of a bassinet would count towards its size since they're integral to its function of rocking the baby. So you can see in Machzah Shekel citing the Chuvas Me'il Tzedakah. That's it. Okay, next.
Now, when it comes to a bassinet, though, the 40 sa, how does it work? Do you include the space in between the legs, or is it just the actual volume of the thing?
Yeah, it seems,
because obviously
not.
The bassinet, the space in the bassinet itself would obviously be included in our measurement.
Right? Yeah, I don't think so, unless you have one of those bassinets like we do, where at the bottom of the legs there's like a shelf thing, so that the underspace can also be a shelf.
Now it's
including in what's being held. The whole point is the thing. The whole point.
I guess it's if the space is part of the function or not part of the function. Right. So if the space is part of the function, the space is counted.
The function of holding, the whole thing is that it would be able to hold and carry stuff.
No, but I'm saying
that's why something that would break apart if you moved it, it does not count.
Yeah, but I'm saying is the space part of the function? Meaning, is just the legs part of the function? Or in your case, you're saying there's shelves in there. The space in those shelves is part of the function. It's not just another.
It's not just function. It's betavka, the ability to carry, which is why if you tried to carry it and it would break, that is not susceptible to tumah.
No, because how big is the legs of the bassinet? The legs of the bassinet, it seems like the function is not necessarily of holding something. The legs are part of its function. It needs those legs to function.
No, it's to move it. The legs are to move to rock the baby. That's why specifically this wording of rocking the baby. It's not just holding the baby. It's movement. It's carrying it. It's moving the thing. That's what makes it susceptible to tumah. So these legs on a bassinet, we're talking about the kind of bassinet that it's used to rock the baby. The space underneath doesn't go towards rocking the baby.
Okay, on the other hand, if it's a shelf,
you can have a solid
space is part of its function.
Yeah, of holding these things.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
Or I mean, is it dafka because we're talking about holding, but there's other kinds of movable objects that don't. What they do is not hold something.
Here, with this thing of susceptible to tumah, we're saying with dafka, it has to be to hold it, to carry it. So much so that if it's just there to stand there and hold it still, it doesn't count. If you would try to move it and it would break, it doesn't count.
Right. Okay, David. So I
want to take a quick second to welcome Rabbi Yossi Rosenthal, who just joined us.
So welcome, Yossi. Do you want to, Yodelab, do you want to continue the reading? I'm actually going to go for about the next 15 minutes. I'm picking my wife up now and going home, and then I'll continue at home. But
Okay, you want to just put yourself on mute and listen while you do that?
yeah, that's a good idea.
Okay.
Um,
Okay, so we're going to continue with the fourth Mishnah Berura. So we're talking about in Hilchos Shabbos with regards to building or destruction. Now, we were talking about a jug that had been refurbished. So basically, it was broken into pieces, and then you put it back together with tar or whatever. So the Mishnah Berura comments. So he said, in order to access those things, you could break it apart, and that wouldn't be a problem because it was, or you wouldn't be like fixing it, setting it up. So you can break apart the repair jug. The Mishnah Berura brings the Pri Megadim, who's inclined to say that the permissibility of breaking the jug applies even to breaking it in a place where it's not bonded with tar. Meaning the Mechaber is saying that it put together with tar, that's not a conditional thing. And we see in the note brings the Pri Megadim, and that the Pri Megadim cites the Lavush, another commentary, who maintains that one may break the kli only along the places in which it is bonded with the tar. So Lavush says you got to break it at where it was sealed. You can't just break the pieces itself more than it was already broken. You got to break it on where it was glued together. But the Pri Megadim himself sees no basis for this distinction. He says because it's not about where it was sealed; it's the fact that the entirety of the kli is inferior. So the malacha of soiser, destruction, doesn't apply. It's not breaking. The thing is already a broken thing. So you're not breaking anything with regards, again, it's not any type of breaking. It's specifically a breaking that is connected to construction. So destruction, whatever. And so the Pri Megadim himself seems to say that doesn't count. And you can see more, but the Chazon Ish says more on this subject. Okay, moving on to Mishnah Berura Hey, number 5. So he said, you can bust open this repair jug to get the stuff as long as you don't cut into it to make any sort of precise hole. And the Mishnah says the same, which will then serve as like an opening of sorts. So you're not creating an opening. You're just trying to access the stuff inside. You're not trying to create a spout. The same applies if one cuts off the top of the jug and intends to make a precise break so that it remains a kli. Which, just to throw it out there, it kind of reminds me of, I don't know if you've ever seen, videos of people who they open champagne with like a sword, and then they bust off the whole top of the wine bottle.
I've never seen that.
You never seen that? People trying to do that? Whatever, it's a thing people will try to do sometimes, and very often, feels like more often than not, they fail and break the bottle. But yeah, if you're trying to, precisely cut the jug in a way that actually makes it.
You mean like this?
Yeah, if you use that switchblade over there, but
Right.
if you were trying to cut it in a way to make a precise break so that you could still pour out of it, that's problematic. But if you're just cutting it off just to open it out, and you're not trying to make a spout, then it's okay. And so let's get into the notes. The Shar Hatzion. He says that this is the implication of what Rashi said in Gemara Beya 33b, Dibra Maskal Vatanan, and this is a straightforward ruling. The Gemara in Shabbos 146a says that one may break open a jug in order to remove its contents, provided that one does not intend to make it into a kli. Rashi in Beya there explains that this is to mean that one should not make a precise break that can serve as an opening, such that the jug will remain a functional kli. The Mishnah Berura here understands that Rashi means that one may not cut off the top of the jug in a precise manner. And you can see the Chazon Ish, who posits that cutting off the top of the jug is invariably deemed a destructive act and cannot be viewed as creating a kli, because one can have a large opening at the top of a jug simply by removing the seal. So the fact that you're cutting it off, you're destroying it. You're doing a destructive act to the vessel, to this item.
I just want to say so Yossi's not lost. These are things that are not permitted to be done on Shabbos, correct?
Correct.
So I want to give them.
Yeah, that's why I get a little. I said before that we're talking about Hilchos Shabbos, of what you can do with regards to construction and destruction on many different levels. So yeah, so the Chazon Ish interprets Rashi to mean that one may not gash an opening on the side of the jug while taking care to leave the kli functional. A person might sometimes be interested in such an opening in order to avoid the trouble of removing the seal from the top of the jug, especially if, let's say, that seal has lettering on it, right? We said you can't rip into letters. You can't rip apart the letters of something on Shabbos or Yom Tov. So maybe he doesn't want to deal with the seal because there's too many letters and he doesn't want to accidentally rip them. So instead he's going to cut into the side of it. So the Chazon Ish, says that Rashi is saying if you're going to cut into the side of it, you have to make sure that it doesn't leave the kli functional. You got to cut into a way that it ruins the thing. For further discussion with regards to removing the top of the jug, see passage 6 below. So we're going to get to that right now. We're still at number 1. We're going to get to 6 later. We'll get into the whole thing of removing a seal on top. All right. So now moving right along. Tikkun mana. So we end. The Mechaber said. So as long as you're not trying to create a precise hole, a sort of spout, because if you're going to do that, it would constitute something called tikkun mana.
Lexa.
So what's tikkun mana?
Lexa.
So the Mishnah Berura says you should see the Taz. Check out the Taz, who implies that even if the hole is a small hole that is not meant for inserting and removing the contents of the jug, it would also be prohibited. So even if you're not creating an exact spout for pouring out or pouring in, at any rate, by rabbinic law, even with regards to a jug like this, which is brittle, we'll get to in a second, and even if it's a large hole that is made for both inserting and removing contents from the jug, then there would be if it's a small hole where you couldn't even pour out or pour into this jug, then that would be rabbinic, even something that's a brittle jug, a brittle container. But if it's large, then that would be biblical. And this is the implication of the Berura Hakra, the Vilna Gaon. So according to the Taz, Shulchan Aruch here refers to a situation in which one is making a small hole solely to remove the contents of the jug and will not be using that hole to place anything inside of the jug. See the Pri Megadim. As mentioned in the introduction, this is forbidden only by rabbinic law. Shulchan Aruch's statement that it is forbidden due to tikkun mana is meant only on rabbinic level. That's what we're explaining here. Since Shulchan Aruch is speaking of a brittle, refurbished, and inferior jug, it is clear that the rabbinic prohibition of forming a small opening applies even to vessels. Just want to check something. Yeah, give me a second. Just want to check something. Okay, whatever. But with regards to the fact that if it's larger and you can pour it in and out, that's a biblical prohibition. Chazon Ish explains why making a single purpose opening in the jug is not a biblical level violation of Makar B'Patish, since the jug already has a dual purpose opening, which is what makes it a functional container. It is already complete. So adding this single purpose opening cannot be considered Makar B'Patish, finishing the manufacture of the jug. He further explains why it would not be a violation of Boina, building construction, since the single purpose opening has nothing to do with the functionality of the kli itself, but is simply a way to extract its contents on a one-time basis. It cannot be considered boina. You didn't construct something, you didn't put something together here. However, forming a dual purpose opening in the jug would be a biblical level violation of makar b'patish or boina, even though the jug already had one such opening. This is because the second opening will be used just as much as the first and is therefore tantamount to forming the first opening in a kli. And we said this is the implication of the Berura Hagra. So you see in Taisvis and Gemara Shabbos 146a, the Maskal Shaver, breaking, cracking, states that the entire Talmudic passage there, with regards to breaking kalim open in order to access their contents, refers to a refurbished kli. The Berura Hagra on the Dibra Maskal Va'afilu clearly holds that this relates even to a discussion later in the Gemara with regard to forming holes in kalim. That too refers to refurbished kalim. Now, the same passage features the distinction between dual-purpose openings, i.e. those made both for removal from and inserting into the kli, which are forbidden by biblical law, and single-purpose openings, which are forbidden only by rabbinic law. Berura Hagra thus implies that these guidelines hold true with regard to refurbished kalim. Rashi in Maseches Beya 33b, the Ramaskal Mustaki, he also holds that this is biblically forbidden to form a dual-purpose opening in a refurbished kli. Taisvis de Ramachos Schil Kitanya, however, disputes this and maintains that making an opening in a refurbished kli is never forbidden by biblical law. This is because making even a permanent opening in such an inferior kli is not significant enough to qualify as a malacha. See Chazon Ish. And the Chazon Ish rules in accordance with that Taisvis. See also Pri Megadim, Mishna, and Ish Abra. Okay. All right, next 7. Okay, so now we said, so if this jug is intact, we're not talking about a refurbished jug, so then you're not allowed to break it even in a manner in which it doesn't form a kli. You can't even bust it open. So the Biur Halacha says that the Mishnah Berura teaches. Okay, you know what? Let's do the Mishnah Berura first, and then we'll do the Biur Halacha, because Biur Halacha talks about the Mishnah Berura. So it's forbidden to break it, even in a manner in which it doesn't form a kli, due to the prohibition of soiser, right? Destruction. Although we generally maintain that one is not liable for soiser unless it is done for the sake of rebuilding, since otherwise it would be mekalkel. You're ruining it. It is nonetheless forbidden by rabbinic law. Berura Hagra, however, agrees with the Paiskim who maintain that there is no prohibition of soiser with regards to kelim, even when one breaks an intact kli. There's no prohibition at all unless one makes it into some sort of vessel by way of this breakage. In that case, one would be liable, according to all opinions, at any rate, due to this makabapatish. You're finishing off this thing. So Biur Halacha says the Mishnah Berura taught us that although this is mekalkel, you're ruining it, it's still nonetheless forbidden by rabbinic law. And it's still a constructive deconstruction, so to speak. So note that while Rashi indicates that one may perform an act of mekalkel when necessary for Shabbos, Taisvis, the Rosh, the Ran, all disagree with Rashi. Moreover, even Rashi might agree that with regards to other malachas, meaning other than breaking a kli, that, yeah, you can't do mekalkel. The proof for this is that it is clear from the Gemara in Eruvin 34b, and Rashi there, that one may not break a large closet even for a Shabbos necessity. Even those poskim who permit breaking an intact kli of less than 40 saw permit it only because they hold that Seisur does not apply to Kalim, not because they hold that mekalkel is permitted for a Shabbos necessity. It is similarly clear from Rambam, Shabbos 1.3 and 117, that mekalkel is a full-fledged rabbinic prohibition which would not be waived for a Shabbos necessity. Thus, there is no room at all for leniency in this regard. A second. No. Yeah, I can do that later. Interesting, very interesting. So now notes. So he said, yeah, it's forbidden to break this vessel, even in a way that doesn't form a kli, because it's soiser. As mentioned above, the Shulchan Aruch rules in accordance with Taisus and the Rosh, the melacha of soiser implies to intact kalim. The Berura Hagra would agree with the Paiskim that there's no prohibition of soiser with regards to kalim, even when you break an intact kli. The Berura Hagra, the Ramaskal She'ena Mechazekes, disagrees with Shulchan Aruch and follows the view of Rana and Rashba, who maintain that the malacha of soiser does not apply to kalim at all. And the Mishnah Berura in note I ruled that one may rely on one may rely on the lenient view with respect to instructing a non-Jew to dismantle the kli for them on Shabbos, because of the fact that there is the opinion that it doesn't apply to kalim at all. So you can ask someone who doesn't have to keep Shabbos to do it for you.
You say you could ask someone to do it?
Yeah, in this case, someone who doesn't have to keep Shabbos, someone who's not Jewish, they don't have to keep Shabbos, you can ask them to do it for you. You could rely on this opinion and ask them to open that kli for you. This.
Oh, okay.
So
that's different than what I said about putting on the lights. That was like the last week.
Oh, yeah, that's very different. That's a very different malachas. Putting on the, I mean,
they're two different. Yeah.
This is just talking about opening this type of vessel, this specific type of vessel, not all types of vessels, but this specific type of thing. You can, this container, and you want it to just be broken apart so you can get your thing that's inside it. So, for example, maybe that will be a good example.
Medicine.
Yeah, medicine. But again, we're talking about opening it a way that is broken apart. So not opening it in a way that keeps it a medicine bottle. Well, again, also most medicine bottles, you're not cracking it open. You're not breaking it open. It's you can unscrew it and screw it on. That's not a problem.
Right.
But let's say there was a medicine that came in some sort of box that actually had to be broken open. So you would not be allowed to do that. But of course, unless it was life-saving medicine, that's a whole other degree. You're allowed to do stuff like that on Shabbos. But yeah,
Sure.
you could instruct, if you have a helper or someone around, someone who's not Jewish, you could ask them, can you open that for me? And
if no one's around in an emergency, you just do it.
Absolutely. If it's an emergency, then yeah, you don't do it. Don't wait. Don't wait. Just go do it. Yeah, that's
right.
Everything gets put on hold.
Okay.
So now moving on. So then so the Mishnah Berura continued and said that in that case, with regards to, so the fact you're saying that the Berura says that Seiser, with regards to this intact container, you're allowed to break it open. Everybody, but still there would be this problem that basically, okay, you wouldn't. Yeah, if okay, so that's if you break it open. But if you open it and that makes it into a kli, that you just made it into a vessel by breaking it open. Let's say something like, I don't know, if by breaking it open you now then made two bowls. Before it was just a box, but now by busting it open, you're making two containers. You're making two bowls. So then you just did what's called makeh b'patish. You just did that final act that you just completed it into a container.
What do you call it? Makeh b'patish.
Makeh b'patish. Makeh means to hit, like the 10 makos.
Yeah.
Right? 10 makos by Pesach means to hit. 10 hittings. Makeh b'patish, with a hammer. Hitting with a hammer. So that's referring to the concept that, especially back when they were building the tabernacle and they're building the Mishkan, and in many cases still today, when you're building certain things, there's the final thing it needs after the construction is just a final tap with the hammer just to finish it off.
Right.
So it's this expression that's used to refer to finishing off the making of some sort of vessel or container or item on Shabbos. That's not allowed. Even though you could say, wait, the whole thing was built. The chair was put together. This was just the final thing.
Right.
No, the final thing, you completed it. That's a problem. So that's what we're saying. If someone takes, let's say, this container that's like a box, and then by breaking it, it completes it into a container. It makes it into a container. Like I said, you take a box and you break it in half, and that makes it into two different bowls. Like let's say you took a coconut. Coconut might be different because it's food, but if it was something that's shaped like a coconut, right, and you broke it open to make two little bowls, that's a problem. You're not allowed to do that. That's universal. And even the Ran and the Rajba, who hold that there's no prohibition in breaking the kli per se, you're allowed to break the small vessels and containers. That's what they hold that. They would agree that forming a functional permanent opening in the vessel is a violation of makeh b'patish, of this completion of construction. As mentioned in footnote A, some maintain that forming the opening is forbidden under Boina, that actually that even making the opening, it's not just the completion of something, but it's also just total construction. So the Mishnah Berura is indicating that according to the Berura Hakra, there's no prohibition at all in breaking an intact kli without intent to create a functional opening. If you're not trying to make an opening out of it, then that's not a problem. Only if you're trying to make an opening would there be an issue. This would fully accord with the view of Rashba and Ran. And the Chazon Ish asserts, however, that this is not the view of Berura Hakra. Although the Berura Hakra indeed rules like the Ran and the Rashba, the malacha of Seiser does not apply to Kalim, that deconstruction does not apply to containers. He maintains that there is a rabbinic prohibition against making an indiscriminate gash in an intact kli, basically cutting into this container, due to concern that one might intend to make a permanent open. The rabbis were worried, this guy's cutting into the side, but maybe he's trying to make a multiple use opening, a spout. So see the Chazon Ish over there for a possible limitation of this prohibition within the view of Biur Hagra. All right, moving on to Mr. Berura 8. Welcome back, Rabbi Mendel.
Thank you. I don't know what happened there exactly.
So now he says
I got an ununderstandable error. But anyway,
so we're saying afilu nekev. We're talking about even if the jug is intact, it's forbidden to break, even in a manner in which one does not form the kli. We're up to Mishnah Berura Ches 8. It does not form a kli.
Kli. Yeah. Right. So he said also the Shabbos. In other words, I feel also you can't break it. Meaning, so before we spoke about if it was broken, then here's what you can do. However, if it's
now we're talking about a regular kli,
a regular
not
kli,
allowed to break into it, even if it doesn't, even if you're not making a kli out of it, even if you're not making a spout,
even if it's not making a kli. So then, meaning to say, meaning he's not making a hole in order to make an opening there, but rather he's just to break it. And then he wrote adding on to it that even just a hole, meaning even a hole, meaning that's not good enough for no. So before he said that even if you want to make a hole, but you don't want to make a hole, or if you want to make a hole also. These beitatil tivusam, that it has both of these things, I guess to its adding on to it to its benefit. Because he's also not breaking it, right? Because before we're saying if you're not making a hole, but rather you're just breaking it. So in this case, he's not breaking it, so you don't have the problem of breaking a vessel. And also it's not an opening. So even though this whole you avoided both the issues, it would look like of breaking a vessel and of making an opening in a vessel, it's still you can do it. The Rambam writes in chapter 23, somebody who makes a hole that is made to go in and out, or to put in and out, either way. Like the hole that is in the chicken coop, that it's meant to let light in, and also for the unfresh air to come out. He's transgressed because of makbepatish, of the finishing touches. Which this is the general term, to anything that finishes any finishing work. This of malachazu, which is the offspring of this main melacha, of this main forbidden labor. That the craftsman hits with a hammer on the vessel b'shas gemara when he's finishing it. The hashves to even out its unevennesses. It's
evenness.
Yeah. The fikach, therefore, gazru al kol nekev. So therefore, they're worried about. They made a gzeira. They're worried about on any hole. Afilu asu lahiti lahachnis levad. Even if it's just meant to put in, to bring in and take out. Shema Yavi lost his neck of Shechayavin, because why? Because maybe you will come to make a type of hole that will be a transgression. Yeah. I'm seeing Magen Avram Shabir that he explained Afilu who lul she'ein mechubla karka, that even if we are talking about a chicken coop that is not connected to the ground, that you're not transgressing baina, the building, from making the hole, because it's not, obviously he's talking about the one that's a chicken coop that's smaller than 40 saw. right? As well as it's not connected to the ground. So now it's considered a movable object. So you don't have from building. There is no building by an item of that size, unless it's like we said before. There's two opinions. One says that the only complete building, no, but I'm sorry, only but other building you can. Some say in Bechlal there's no building by it, even complete. But in this case, he is obligated because of Makabeh Padish. Why shehu gemar melocha? He's finishing. It's finishing touches on this chicken coop. So therefore, you have a problem with Makabeh Patish, even though you don't have a problem of binyan. The cause of Eid Perek Yud, and the Rambam writes furthermore in chapter 10. Anybody who does any kind of work that finishes something, this is an offspring of the main malacha of Makabeh Patish, and he's obligated, and obligated means from the Torah. It's a Torah obligation. Somebody who makes a hole any size, bein be'etz, bein matoches, whether in wood or in glass, bein bevinyan, bein bekalim, or in a structure or in vessels or in movable objects. This is a offspring of Makabeh Patish, right? Of hitting with the hammer, the final touches. And he's obligated. However, any opening that is not made for bringing in and taking out, you are not obligated on making it. Ad kan devarav. Until here is the words of the Rambam. Isa Gemara. It says in the Gemara, the imtaka masmer b'keisel, that if he stuck a nail into the wall, banged the nail into the wall, this to hang something on it, chayav mishum makabeh patish. He is obligated because of makabeh patish. If he makes a hole in the ground of the house, that in order so that water should come out,
a drain. He made a drain.
Chayav mishum baina. In that case, he is chayav because of building. Why? Because it's a interesting. I guess the notes will hopefully explain why in the wall to hang is makabeh patish, is a finishing touch, and why to drain is building.
Right. I mean, just maybe in the notes. I mean, there's definitely notes on it, but just off the top of my head, I mean, I could see a difference in the fact that your accessorizing is finishing touches, but actual function of a floor drain is much more of a construction job. I mean, just the difference. For example, in my own house, I'd feel your average Joe feels totally comfortable putting a nail in the wall to hang up a picture, but no one's installing a floor drain in their home. They're gonna call a contractor, like that.
Right.
With Stam speaking of floor drains, and especially because it's 3 weeks, so my mind is very much on Eretz HaKodesh. So in Eretz Yisrael, it's very common that you have houses when you go to mop your floor, there's drains even in regular floors. Just like Stam, there's drains in many dining rooms, kitchens, a lot of the older construction buildings in Eretz Yisrael.
Right.
So that when people mop, they don't have to then squeegee it up and pour it down the toilet in a bucket. It drains away. My mother, when she was, Baal Shuva, living in Crown Heights in an apartment above Sunshine Pharmacy. So they're on the third floor, and she had an Israeli roommate who she came back one day, and the Israeli roommate was mopping. And my mother said, "Where's your bucket?" And the woman said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "Well, where do you think the water's going?" And the woman went, "I don't know. It goes down the drain, like in Israel." And she's like, "We don't have that here. It's not how that works." And so they went downstairs to the apartment underneath them, where this lovely elderly widow woman was living by herself. And they knocked on the door, and they saw in her apartment, this woman had buckets in different positions around the apartment because she was used to regularly the apartment would drip, but she never complained. She never told the landlord. She never told the upstairs, the ladies, the girls upstairs. She just would put the buckets out. She was like, okay. She was not originally from America, and she was a very quiet, non-confrontational woman. And so she just knew, okay, every once in a while it drips. So she would just put buckets out. So stop. Yes, having drains, it's an important thing.
Yeah.
All right. So footnote. So back to the beginning of Ches. So we said we're talking about you didn't just make a hole as an opening, but we're talking about actually breaking the jug. So in this case, there's no issue of makabeh patish or baina because one is not fashioning a permanent functional opening. Shulchan Aruch nevertheless forbids it under Soiser, as the Mishnah Berura explains, as we explained in the previous note. Okay. So now we said so we said so we're talking about even a simple hole. This is the chiddush of the mechaber, is that even a simple hole, something small, you're meaning you're not completely demolishing it, but you're making an indiscriminate gash and it's just a little slice, a little cut. But yeah, that's still a problem. And two favorite factors, because you're not breaking the jug, so there would be no issue of soiser, and it's also not an opening, so there's no prohibition of makabeh patish. But still, the mechaber is mechadesh, it's still aser. The Mishnah Berura is not explicit as to the reason it's forbidden. So Lavush states that making this opening is forbidden under soiser. For this too is considered a form of breaking the kli. So even though it's not, you're not totally breaking it, but it's still a type of soiser. You cut a hole into it. Mishnah Berura in note 23 seems to take this view. On the other hand, the Levushe Serad, which Sharatzian here cross-references as his source, states that it is because we are concerned that one might form a permanent opening. It seems that according to Levushe Serad, making a gash in a kli does not qualify under Soiser. See also Tosefes Shabbos. And we'll also see further footnote E to passage 6 below. To summarize Mishnah Berura's view with regard to opening a small kli, which does not have a capacity of 40 sa. That's what we mean by small kli. That still could be pretty big, but right. Yeah. Purposely forming a dual purpose opening is forbidden by biblical law, and purposely forming a single purpose opening is forbidden by rabbinic law. In any kli, whether it's intact or this reconstructed inferior type of kli, completely demolishing an intact kli or indiscriminately gashing a hole in such a kli is subject to a machlekes between the Shulchan Aruch and the Berura. Doing the same to an inferior kli is permitted according to all views. So a little jab in an inferior kli, everyone agrees is fine. But a regular kli, there's a machlekes. This discussion strongly affects the permissibility of opening cans on Shabbos. However, since the law in passage 8 is a further crucial factor in analyzing this matter, we will present it in footnote C there. See also contemporary halachic discussions on page 228, right, which we did, and yeah, we did all of them. Yeah. Just wanted to make sure. Yeah. Which we did yesterday. Okay. So then the Rambam, then the Mishnah Berura brought the Rambam. So the Mishnah Berura basically is filling out some details with regards to fashioning holes in various objects in Shabbos. So what's the next one? So we said about how the final stages of the chicken coop, even if the coop's not attached to the ground, it's small, so there's no issue of baina, but it's still makabeh patish. The Magen Avraham makes this point in order to resolve a seeming contradiction that the Kesef Mishna, which is a commentary on the Rambam, that the Kesef Mishnah raises in the Rambam. So the Rambam states over there, making a tiny hole in a chicken coop so that light can enter it. That's a violation of baina. Elsewhere, he states that making a hole in a chicken coop so that light can enter and the dank air can escape. So you're doing two things. Over there, he says both light can enter and dank air can escape. Over there, he says that it's makabeh patish. So the Magen Avraham, as explained by the Pri Megadim, suggests that the first law refers to a coop that's attached to the ground. So then that's baina, because it's something that's attached. It's mechuber l'karka. So baina could apply. The Magen Avraham posits that any improvement to a coop that is attached to the ground would be a violation of baina. So that's enough. If the hole merely allows light to enter, even though it's not a dual purpose, and even though it's a small hole, maybe, but it doesn't matter. It's mechuber l'karka, so any sort of thing would be baina. Now, the second law, where the Rambam in chapter 23 says, you're trying to let air in and, that terrible smell of a chicken coop out, that's talking about a detached coop that's smaller than 40 sa. This coop has the status of a kli, and therefore the malacha of baina does not apply to it. See footnote 8 to 313.9 above for discussion of Rambam's view regarding the applicability of baina to kelim. The malacha under consideration is makabeh patish, for which a proper hole that completes the manufacture of the coop is required. Accordingly, only a dual function hole, which allows light to enter and dank air to exit, qualifies as a biblical level of the malacha. Thus, the entire clause in Rambam, which Mishnah Berura just cited, refers to making a hole in a detached chicken coop. Then continues on and says, okay, so the Rambam writes in chapter 10, anyone who does any sort of like anything in that final stage of manufacture is a tolda of makabeh patish, and it's biblical. So even if someone made a slight hole, whether in wood or metal, doesn't matter. So the Sharatzian says this is referring to where his intention in doing so is for some beneficial purpose. But if the hole was made in a destructive manner, it would constitute mekalkel and would involve only a rabbinical prohibition. You're just ruining the thing. You're not doing anything constructive, which is why before, I think you may have missed it, but I said, there's when we talk about soiser, we're talking about a constructive destruction. It's not just stop ruining it. The kalkel is ruining the item. Soiser means that there's some sort of
soiser means I'm destructing
or maybe better,
something,
maybe a better word would be a productive destruction. There's some productive thing that's coming out of it. You're getting something out of it, but not just ruining it. Mekalkel is ruining it. So, and then we said, so it's a tolda whether the structure of kelim, it's a tolda of makabeh patish. So then the person's liable. So the Sharatzian then also see lavushe sirad, and the Rambam cited here has taught that making a hole in a structure is a violation of makabeh patish. Lavushe sirad points out, citing the Kesef Mishna, this statement is seen in contradiction to Rambam's earlier statement, like we just said before, that making a hole in a coop is a violation of bainus. So here we cannot utilize the resolution of Magen Avram that we said, because that one is mechubed lakarka and one is a smaller one that's detachable. Because in both clauses, the Rambam is discussing ground structures. So what's going on now? So seemingly we have this machlekes again, stira minei ubei again. So Machzah Shekel explains that in this case, one would indeed be liable for bainah in addition to makabeh patish. So Rambam chose to present the malacha makabeh patish in order to encompass making a hole in a kli, which appears in this clause, to which the malacha of bainah does not apply. He's trying to include both by bringing out the makabeh patish factor. For alternative approaches to resolution of the various statements, you can see the Even Ezel, Hazel, Nishmas Adam, Aruch Shulchan, and B'nai Shabbos. Okay. Then we said, but it's different if it's an opening that's not meant for inserting a removal. You're not liable for making it. So the Sharatzian again says that it stands to reason that Rambam's requirement of dual-purpose hole refers only to container-like vessels where the hole one makes for them is deemed an opening, literally an entranceway, as stated in the Gemara. Therefore, well, I kind of like entranceway better because, again, it implies things are going in and out, just the whole purpose. It's not just stam an opening. I didn't just make a hole for whatever. Yeah, it's a hole for the purpose of things. That's the integral point, like that thing. It's for stuff going in and out. Therefore, we require that it be made both for insertion and removal, like an entranceway. There we go. So other objects, however, require only that it be typical to make that sort of hole, whether it's dual or single purpose, in that object. Magen Avram abridged Rambam's language and cites as follows: one who makes even a slight hole, whether in wood or metal, and whether in a structure or in kelim, is liable for makabeh patish, provided that it is made both for insertion and removal. End quote. This somewhat indicates that the requirement for a dual-purpose hole applies to all objects listed in the Rambam, but this does not seem accurate. The correct interpretation of Rambam is seen from the full quotes by Mishnah Berura, in which Rambam states in a separate clause that one is not liable for an opening that is not dual-purpose. So to explain, as mentioned in the introduction of this halacha, forming a dual-purpose opening in a vessel is a violation of biblical law, whereas forming a single-purpose opening is forbidden by rabbinic law. Sharatzian asserts here that this applies only to vessels. There's no such requirement for other objects. For them, one is liable even for a single-purpose hole if it is typically made in that object to serve its purpose. Sharatzian assertion seems difficult. After all, single-purpose hole in a vessel that serves the purpose of the vessel should also be violation of makabeh patish. So this needs basically. This needs further study.
Yeah.
On a related note, the Chazon Ish discusses a case in which a person makes two holes in a case that contains liquid. So we talked, like we said, maybe the soda can or whatever, or maybe a milk carton.
Well, think about like a can of tomato sauce where you take the thing and you poke the one hole and you make for air, one for it to go out, one for air to come in.
You're right. This mamish the next words. It says you're right. Well done. Think of one to pour the liquid out of it, and the other to allow air that will push the liquid contents out. So the Chazon Ish, which by the way, that's a thing. Many Shabbos Shabbatones have those like big water jugs with the spout.
Yeah.
And there's the thing, you're supposed to poke the hole at the top, especially when you both for drinking water, and a lot of times they'll have those for washing on mitzi. First of all, it takes forever to come out. Secondly, it's like then it gets down and it won't come out on its own. So you have to like be squeezing it to squish the water out.
Caving in on itself because there's no air coming in to replace it.
Yeah, you just pop that little hole that it's where it says, and things will come out smoothly. So the Chazon Ish maintains that that's a perfect example, by the way, because that's mamash keli, but it's disposable. Right. So there's we already said actually disposable. Just the fact that it's disposable, yeah. But anyway, so the Chazon Ish maintains that if either hole can be used for either purpose, then one has essentially created two dual-purpose holes. So I like your example better, like with the can. Let's say, especially if it's something like tomato sauce, like a sauce you're just pouring out. Yeah, I could pour out of either one.
Right, even though I'm intending to pour out of one and air to come out of the other, the fact is, if I
made one wider and one thinner,
it'll still work.
Right. Yeah. You could technically do either one. The Chazon Ish maintains that so it's deraisa. However, only one of the holes can be used to pour the liquid out. The other hole is just way too small, like a tiny. Like with the water bottle, it's just like a needle.
Say you took the thing and you poked the bit, like the triangle hole in one, and then you just took like stabbed a little hole in the other one. But if you were to put it, tomato sauce is too thick to even come out of it.
That's what I'm saying. Well, like with a can of soda, when I've done it, not for air, when I've done it to ruin it. But let's say you did it where like you popped it open, but then the other hole you do is just a tiny little needle hole, like just so then that's two single-purpose holes, and so the violation is derabbanan. Rav Shlomo Zalman Auerbach questions both of these points, as you can see in Shmir Shabbos Kol Chasa 9, footnotes 28 and 29. With regards to the first point, if it were true that a hole that allows air to enter in order to push the liquid out is considered a hole made for insertion, then one should be liable even for making that hole. Because the laws of physics dictate that air must enter through the hole in order to allow liquid to exit. Yet we know. So see, who said we weren't going to learn physics?
Yeah.
So yet we know that this is only a violation of rabbinic law. As you see in Mishna Berura, note 26 below. So we're only at note 8. We got 18 more to go to see that. He explains therefore.
We try to leave a little suspense here.
A little suspense, yeah. He explains, therefore, that such a hole is not considered even a hole for inserting, since one does not actually want the vessel to store air. You just need the air to push the liquid out. So what? Physics, I need the air.
You're not actually storing it. Yeah,
I don't want the air. I'm not trying to. Just trying to push it out. This is unlike the hole in a chicken coop where you want light or fresh air to enter that coop and remain there, and you want the bad air to exit. No, I want the clean air in.
Yeah, that's the whole point of it. Yeah.
So secondly, Rav Auerbach holds generally if one makes two holes with one solely for insertion and the other solely for removal, both independently serve the kli in some way, then this would be a biblical level violation of Makabeh Patish. Finally, it must be noted that Chazon Ish maintains the requirement for a dual-purpose opening applies to any and all objects, including structures that are attached to the ground. Okay, two more. Then we said, so the Gemara says, so that was the Rambam. So then Mishnah Berurah quoted the Gemara Shabbos 103a that if you put a nail for hanging, it's Makabeh Patish. Making the hook constitutes fashioning a useful implement. So it's not about making the hole in the wall. It's that now this nail is a hook. And so that's Makabeh Patish. So it seems there's no baina here because you didn't improve the structure in any way. If anything, maybe you ruined it. You're going to lose your security deposit. And actually see Chut Sheni and Mishmeres Mayed for an entirely different approach to this issue. It's fascinating. I don't have any of these svarim, but I'd be interested to see what it is. I don't know what they are. Now, but then we said, but a hole in the floor, you're creating a drain, or then that's boinet. Although this is a single-purpose hole, since it's made only to allow water to exit, nothing enters the house through it. Well, something could, but you don't want it to. You don't want any mice or snakes. The point is that water just exits. You don't want, you're not making it for anything to come in. One is nonetheless liable. As mentioned in footnote double L above, forming a single-purpose hole that serves its typical function in a ground structure, something that's with the karka, is forbidden by biblical law. See Pri Megadim, Ishal Avram, Sharatzian, cited in footnote we brought before, extended this to all objects other than container-like vessels. Right? The Sharatzian said not just Mechuba the karka, but any item, as long as we're not talking about a container-like vessel, yeah. You put a single hole in it, it's deiraisa.
So that's the nafkamina then between is going to be between is it a problem of baina we're talking about, or is it a problem of makbeh patish? Is that then whether it's a single purpose hole or a double purpose hole is going to have
well, the problem is the problem is
going to have an effect on whether it's a derabbanan or deraisa, whether it's a biblical issue or it's a rabbinical issue.
Right. But and you see the machlokes though, because the Chazon Ish says no. There's no liability for a single purpose opening, even when it's made in a ground structure. Doing a single hole, you're not doing anything. It's fine. It's not boinet. It's not like a patish. Yeah.
Right.
Okay, that was it.
Okay, so Mishna Berura test 9. So he said that. So before we were talking about making a new hole, but even if there's already a hole now there and you're coming to widen it. Even if you're not widening it to so much to the degree, even if you're not widening it to the point that you're going to be entering and exiting, because like we said before, that's a problem. If you're widening it to be a dual purpose hole, if you're making a dual purpose hole, is a problem. It says, but if you're widening a hole, even if you're not widening it to the point that it's going to be dual purpose. But still, it's still a problem according to the rabbinical part of the prohibition.
Which notes, just as it is forbidden to create a single-purpose hole due to concern that one might create the same hole in a chicken coop where it serves a dual purpose, so too it is forbidden to expand a single-purpose hole due to concern that one might expand a similar hole in a chicken coop when it was originally insufficiently wide to serve as a dual-purpose hole. Now it will be rendered sufficient for that dual purpose.
Yeah,
so it's this gzeira that up.
And then we said that then the Ramah says Ubulvachi skaven lekach. This means that this hinges on the fact that this is your intention, which like we've kind of already touched upon before in terms of like the Chazon Ish, I think was talking about the can that you intending to let something and you're not intending to let what the intended purpose is makes a difference. So the Ramah says is you have to be intending. Now the Ramah here, he's only coming to explain what the Mechaber's view is. The davke that specifically if he is intending to widen the hole. But if he's not intending to widen the hole, even though it's certain that it's going to get widened from what he's doing, it's allowed. Like the Mechaber himself finishes after this. However, the opinion of the Ramah himself, see after Nahaga, that even if you're not intending to widen it, it's also you're not allowed. If it is certain that it's going to happen, and he really should have wrote it there as a yeshemim, as an opinion. But the reason he didn't do that is because he is paskening that lahalacha. That's his actual ruling. So therefore, he didn't say some say that it's just be viewed as like he holds by the mechaber, but there's an opinion that says otherwise. But rather, he himself is of the opinion that even if it's so in the first Haggah, he's just explaining the mechaber's opinion, that they're saying that the mechaber's opinion is is that to widen it, you're not allowed so long as you're intending to widen it. But if you're not intending to widen it, even if it will certainly get widened, it's fine. And then later, he brings his own view on it, which is that even if you don't intend to, even if you're not intending to widen it, if it's certainly going to get widened, it's still not allowed. Takua. Right, so the Mechaber says that if a knife was stuck in a barrel from before Shabbos, you're allowed to bring it to put it in and bring it out. Why? Because, like he said, he's not intending to make it wider in this way. He's just intending to stop up and open up the hole. But it's certain that when you're sticking a knife in and out, it's going to get widened. But since that's not your intention, that's fine. So Mishna Berura Yud Aleph Takua. Meaning that it was wedged in strongly. Because the prohibition, the primary prohibition here is only from the sages. So he holds that it's allowed. Being that he doesn't, he's not. This is not his intention. So meaning that Mechaber, if it was a biblical prohibition, and it's certain it's going to happen, then even if you didn't intend it, he still holds you can't. Then you still can't do it. But if it's a rabbinical prohibition, then if you don't intend it, even though that it's going to happen, then it's fine. And the opinion of the Ramah is arguing against him. The dafki kishahitzi pam achas mi be'ediyim. So what's the point of the Ramah's opinion? Why does the Ramah hold the way he holds? Because the Ramah holds in a case where it's certain that you're going to widen it, even if you don't intend, it's still no good, right? However, in this case, the Ramah holds that if you've already taken it out, you not just put it in, but you've already put it in and taken it out and then put it back in. At this point, you're not going to widen it anymore. It's not certain that you're going to widen it anymore because already by your first putting it in and taking it out, you already widened it some. But otherwise, it is not allowed because it is certain that you're going to widen it, and he holds that Amo holds that even if you don't intend, even by a rabbinical. Even if you don't intend, if it's certain, you can do it. The after who passes that even though it is a opening that you're not meaning to enter and exit from it, you're not meaning to dual purpose. So the that it's that the prohibition is only from the sages, the canal, and like before. But the Ramah holds, so this is a very important general thing, that the Mechaber holds that by a rabbinical prohibition, where it's certain it's going to happen, but if you don't intend it, it's okay. Whereas the Ramah holds that even by a rabbinical prohibition, if it's certain to happen, even if you don't intend it, it's no good. Behind the commons, specific base, and see later in subsection 12, the Bekesel Shumachuber, that a wall that is connected. Gam Mechaber made the also lahitziasak and trade to Mer Shabbos. So even the Mechaber holds there that you're not allowed to pull out the knife that was stuck in it from before Shabbos. As well as a container that holds 40 saw, which has the same which is categorized basically is the same as connected to the ground. The Yitzagam came Mishem Kli, the Havi Kahil, that it comes out of being of the categorization of a movable object because it's like a tent. The Sham b'miskav and anekev chayav, that there when he's looking to that if he were intentionally widening the hole, he's obligated mishum kedeach to havitala the beina. So he's chayav because of kedeach, which is like almost like stabbing or something, no? in modern Hebrew anyway, I think kadech is stabbing.
I.e., drilling a hole meant to be filled. That's, I guess, poking. No,
Okay,
I guess
poking.
no. I mean, but it means specifically. I think, like it's saying, specifically a hole that you're supposed to fill. So if you're making a hole for a cork to go in, or
right, or you whatever, something like this. Or like in modern construction, you have where you drill a hole in a stone wall to put the anchor in and to put a thing. Whatever.
So you put the drill bits, like when you're drilling with the drill bit, so that you can put the screw there or whatever. Yeah,
right, to put something in there. The havit, but that is an offspring of building. Why? Because we're talking about not a small movable object, but rather either a connected object or alternatively a movable object larger than or a non-connected object larger than 40 saw, which now makes it the same as connect to the ground, and now it's building. It's offspring of building. And therefore, even if you don't have intention to do it, but still it is for sure to happen. It is certain that this is what's going to happen. So and now in terms of practical rulings, the Magen Avram El Yerabba Gira and Bekiva Eger, they all held what the Psikaresha Asur Af B'Mils D'Rabbanan. So they all hold like Drama, that even by a Midrabbanon, if it's psikaresha, it doesn't make a difference, right? If it's certain, even if it's not intended, you can't do it. But in this case, they were leaning, the Magen Avram and the Gerah were leaning that to the ruling that even by a wall, when it's not intended, it's allowed. Why? Because he doesn't need the hole. And therefore, it is a malacha. It is a labor that is not needed. That's not needed for itself. Meaning you don't need the malacha that you're doing. You don't need this hole. And it's worse than other rabbinical prohibitions. The asur heicha shu psikaresha, that it's not allowed when it's certain. Kevan shehu gam kein mekalkel. Why? Because it is also, you're also destroying. It's like just messing it up. The gam hu kil achar yad, and also he's doing it in a non-usual way. Umimela nasa guma case like sasakin. Why? Because automatically the hole is you're making the hole in the wall by pulling out the knife. That you're widening the hole. The el besimin shin yud aleph sifches gabe tznain, and like in 3:11 subsection 8, tznain is what? It's a cabbage.
I lost you. A radish, yeah.
A radish, yeah. A radish. Right, that's where I remember it's from. I remember it's from there's the idea of cutting in Isser V'Heter of cutting a radish because it's sharp.
Right.
So that's the name, yeah. Ein Sham, see there.
Good memory.
Ella Sha'ilam Nagu by Yisur Lahitzi. But so it's like a barely, like there's so many different things that make it different, but still people the minhag has been not that we don't pull it out. The nidaka is an ekabakesel because it looks like making a hole in a wall. The gamma taz mitzadit came bikar adin after kesel, and the taz also leans this way, meaning the ikar adin, meaning his. Even though he's not necessarily recommending to do it, but the actual mitzad, the main halacha on it is that it will be allowed, even by a wall. Umikol makim see him, but still he finished there. He concluded there the ein biyadi lahakil neged trumas adeshin v'shalom v'ramash apaskul kulim b'seiv siman lahachmil in kesel. But at the end of the day, meaning he in theory he holds it should be allowed. However, he concluded that he cannot be lenient on that, being that the Turumas Hadesh and the Shulchan Aruch and the Ramah all ruled in the end of the Siman to be stringent when it comes to a wall. The Eliyarab also holds like Shulchan Aruch Ramah. The Efshad the Nechel Leishia Nekev Meruvach Lachsav Litkiv Beyatzakin, that maybe it's more comfortable to him the idea of the hole becoming wider when you put the knife back in. But even Zeb told me also, and in this way, according to everybody, it would be not allowed. Elul inyan chavis. However, by a container, the ikar inyan hurak midrabanan. So basically saying that in the case of the wall, even though it's talked at a bun, but there's a lot of other complications and things that because what it looks like, and it looks like a wall, and there's different reasons given. But in that case, at the end of the day, they don't allow it. But in this case, where the whole original prohibition in the first place is only rabbinical. So then you can rely, right, as we know that in the case of great need, right, in the case of great need, you can rely on, if there's a valid opinion that holds that it's allowed, you can rely. So obviously the mechaber is considered a valid opinion. So in the case of the container, that the entire prohibition in the first place is only a rabbinical prohibition. So then, when it's great need, you can rely on the mechaber to allow to take out the knife on Shabbos. Since he's not intending to widen the hole, even in the case where he did not take it out first. So basically, he's saying that we should really go according to the Ramah. That in the first place, we should go according to the Ramah. That unless he took it out before Shabbos, right? So he didn't just stick it in, but rather he also took it out and already widened the hole. That then we can follow that. However, in a case of great need, we can follow the mechaber, who holds that even if you didn't pull it out, even if it was just stuck in before Shabbos, and now you take it out for the first time on Shabbos, in a case of great need, we can rely on that. Yeah, so that is Yud Aleph.
We do some notes.
Yeah, let's do the notes before we continue, because that was a long Mishna Berura too.
Yeah, can I know? There's lots of notes. This is action-packed.
Yeah. This thing. It's funny because this is, which I guess is not unusual, but very often in the first subsection is when he's setting all in other words, everything else in the Siman is going to be rules that build on that. So since this is the first one where he's setting sort of the principles, it always tends to be the longer, heavier, more complex sif in the Siman.
Yeah, makes sense. So let's go back to. No, that's fine. Okay. So here we. So we said the Shulchan Aruch. So all the way back actually to the previous one. There was, I think, one or two that I missed. The previous verse, we said the intention is expanding the whole. So the Shulchan Aruch itself concludes if he didn't mean to, but it just his action caused it to be expanded, it's okay. The Shulchan Aruch maintains one may perform an act whose inevitable but intended result is a rabbinic prohibition, the Rabbanan. So, yeah. So in this case, then it would be mutter because it was only a Rabbanan to start with. The Ramah himself, though, says even if one did not intend it, it's still usher because of psik reisha. The Ramah holds you're not allowed to perform a psik reisha the loinichale that you didn't realize, even if the result is only the Rabbanan. So there's a major that's a major nafkuna because mechaber and Ramah. Mechaber holds that it's allowed and Ramah is not allowed. And then it adds. Really, the Ramah should have said Yeshayimrim. Should have said that some say in order to indicate that he's saying a view that disagrees with that of Shulchan Aruch, which is usually what the Ramah does. He usually says Yesh Emre, meaning not the Mechaber, like that, and that's usually how he says that he disagrees with the Mechaber. So
what's the definition of the neichale that he gives over there, or does he?
I mean, in the notes he didn't give. I mean, well, he doesn't give it. I think he's just going off of what the Mishna itself says. If he did not intend to do so, the guy intends to. That it's only usher when you intend to expand it. But if he doesn't mean to expand it, then even if it's a pigresha, then it's okay. The nechale, yeah, he doesn't like have a thing specifically on the.
I mean, I think generally it means like that he doesn't care. It doesn't bother him.
Yeah, whatever. I think it just means it's unintended.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, it means it
means like it doesn't make a difference
to
him, basically.
It's fine by him. Yeah, it does make a difference. Yeah. I think that's how you literally would like translate it into the words, but yeah, that it's unintended. So okay, and then it says, had the Ramah begun his comment with those words, the Yeshayimnim, he would have clarified he's citing dissenting view, but that would have been at the expense of issuing his own definitive ruling on the decree. Since he would have first elucidated the Shulchan Aruch's view and then proceeded simply said his dissenting view. In this way, while it's true that Ramah sacrificed clearly setting forth that he's setting a view that is at odds with the Shulchan Aruch, he made it clear that halacha, practical halacha law, is that a psik resha of expanding the whole is forbidden. So that's why the Ramah didn't say Hashem, because he didn't want people to think that it's secondary. He wanted to say this is the main. This is how we do. Okay, so now we got into the wedged Mishna that you so beautifully said and explained. So a lot of this might even be repetitive, because I think you actually were mechavan to a lot of these things. But yeah, okay. So the Ramah maintains a psik resha is forbidden even with regards to matters of rabbinic nature, we said, right? So it's worth noting some authorities distinguish between the Rabbanan prohibitions that are imposed because they bear resemblance to biblically forbidden malachas, and those imposed only as a safeguard against transgression of biblical prohibitions. We said this actually a couple of weeks ago. There's a difference between when it's because it's mechzik deiraisa versus this is just offense to protect from doing a deiraisa.
Right.
When it comes to prohibitions in the latter category, meaning to just protect from doing a deiraisa, a person performing the psik resha act does not actually intend to perform the act that may lead to the biblical prohibition. It's only an inevitable result of his act. Therefore, there's no reason to be concerned that he might transgress it.
Right, meaning if the whole problem is that you're afraid you're going to come to do something, well, if it's not intended, how are you going to come to do that? You're not intending to do it. So, right, yeah.
And the Ramah and the Mishna Berura, here do not seem to agree with this distinction, since expanding the single-purpose opening is forbidden only as a safeguard against doing the same in a chicken coop. Yeah. Okay, so then we said with this kedeach, right? So when one attends, because he's liable for drilling a hole meant to be filled, which is a tolda of baina. Such a hole serves its purpose merely by being able to fill it in, so it need not be a dual-purpose hole. Therefore, purposely expanding it is a biblical level violation of the Melacha of Baina. This is entirely inapplicable to Kalim. All Rishonim, even those who hold the Melacha of Baina applies to Kalim in some circumstances, would agree that there's no violation of Kedeach when making a hole in them. And we'll see a footnote later about this. Okay, so then later we said, over here, Magen Avraham and the Gra are inclined to say that in essence, even with regards to a wall, removing the knife is permitted when one does not intend to enlarge the hole, since you didn't need the hole, and it's a malacha she'ein tzricha l'gufa. You didn't need the thing itself. So malacha not needed for its own sake, right? So forming or expanding a hole for purposes of serving the structure or the kli in some way is a malacha that is needed for its own sake, whether boina or makav patish. But here, though, you don't have any interest in enlarging the hole, so it's considered a malacha she'ein tzricha l'gufa, which, according to most Rishonim, is only prohibited by rabbinic law. Sharat says, see further by the Bir Agra, who states that the truth of the matter is, as the Magen Avraham states in the name of the Magen Mishna, who indicates that this does not have a status of malacha at all, not even psik resha, which you see over there. So to explain, the Magen Mishna in Shabbos 12:2 teaches a fundamental principle with regard to acts that serve to transform a basically nondescript object, like a piece of wood or metal, into a kli. If you perform that act with intent to transform the object into a kli, then one is liable for makah b'patish. But if one has no such intent, then although the object may indeed now be a functional kli, it is not even a psik reisha. It is simply. Oh, good morning, Reb Chaim.
Okay, 1 second. So the last Mishna Berura here. The Isa Nekva Pesach, Leitz Leimer, the Avshma Veda, the Besif Yud Beis Teichel Zaken Hal Yitachal B'Lav Tolush, Mut Leitz B'Shabbos L'Gol Gavni, Leishayach Sham Mishum Beina, Ach Shon Deish Mishum Zaken Pitzchal, Ba'afin La'achnes Leitz Al Gabon Midban Asur. So you're saying that the reason the Ramah brings out the fact that you're making a hole, that's an opening, is that we know that if you stamp to pull a knife out of something, let's say it's stuck in a thing, to pull it out is not a problem. He's pointing out this is different because in that case you're not making a hole that has any function, whereas this case, even though it's not a dual function thing, but you are still making a hole that has a function, whereas in the other case where you're allowed to pull the knife out, it's a hole with no function,
right, which is also d'Rabbanan.
Yeah. So
yeah, okay.
Yeah. So that's
tomorrow we'll do base.
Okay, good. All right. Good morning, Chaim.